Hi everyone, today we're going to have a look at working in Photoshop, and we're going to have a look at downloading some fonts, we're going to have a look at downloading some brushes, and having a look at how we can set text and images onto a wall type graphic, something like you can see here in my Photoshop at the moment. Okay, so we're going to cover off setting it up from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'll just turn off those bits of my image for starters, and then we'll have a look at the techniques that we need to get going. So first thing that we want to do when we're working on something like this is maybe start to look at using a custom font. So in order to do that, we want to go to find some fonts, and in this case I've gone to the font, which I like. It's a pretty kind of standard site. It's got lots of fonts. Okay, so when we look at fonts, basically we always have our serif type font. So let's have a click on serif here, and we might just go through this way. Actually, let's go serif here, and we can see that these serif type fonts, the defining feature are these serifs that sit on the end of the letter forms. Okay, so these are often good for traditional style fonts or for fonts that you want to use sometimes for body copy. Other types of fonts that we tend to have are sans serif fonts. And we can see here that the ends of our letter forms tend to finish in a square or truncated manner without any kind of decoration. And then we have specialty type fonts, and a lot of these specialty type ones, let's have a look here. We might have a look at some distorted fonts. Okay, and we can see here that these are things that you would use for headings or for major pieces of pieces of text in a poster or something. They're intended to be fun to read, but they're not necessarily something that you would want to read a large body of text with. But they're ideal, if you're using in our kind of situation. Okay, so if you want to set something up on a wall, then you might be basically just like, once you find a font that you like, you'll find that there are tens of thousands on this site. It'll download as a zip file. You double click on the zip file. So let's just go open that. Okay, so I've got Bad Coma here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open on my Mac my font book. Okay, you can just search for that up in your search bar up the top if you want, and then all you have to do here is you grab your font and you just drag it straight down. So Bad Coma, TTF stands for True Type File. I'm just going to drop it straight into my font book, and it's loaded up and ready for me to use. Okay, so that's really good. Okay, I wanted to show you one more asset for loading into Photoshop as well, which is a little bit more technical, but you'll find it's really worthwhile, and that is loading brush sets in. Now we've got Brush Easy is a really good, easy to use site as far as Photoshop brushes go. But you'll find that there's lots online. Some are paid, some aren't. Okay, and you'll see that there are lots of different styles, and you'll be able to search through them. It's really good. Okay, but especially if you're working like on the wall, you might like to work with like paint type splats and things like that to add some texture to your wall. So once you get something like this, we can just download it, and we'll just wait for it while it gives us a bit of advertising. Okay, and now it's downloading. It shouldn't take too long to download, and once we've got it, we'll just open it up. Okay, and we can see it here, drips and splats. I'm just going to throw it onto my desktop so it's a little bit easier to find, and then we'll have a look at the method for downloading these types of fonts as well. These types of brushes. So I'm going to go back to Photoshop here, and I've got, at the moment, we've got an eraser selected. It doesn't really matter. If you've got a brush or an eraser selected, you're going to have this brush palette up here that looks like a little folder. If I click on it here, it'll pop it out from the side, and we've got brush settings as our first menu, but the second tab from up the top here, if I click on that one, you can see it's titled brushes. Okay, and this is going to give us the menu that we want. So if we click on this little hamburger icon up the top here, we're going to be able to come down to import brushes. Okay, click on import brushes, go to my desktop, and you know, hopefully you won't have as many files sitting on your desktop as what I do. And drips and splats was our brushes. And once I get into it, we can see it's got dripsandsplats.abr. So ABR stands for Adobe Brush Resource, and that's the type of pack that we want to import. So we're just going to click on open. Fantastic. And it's going to bring them into Photoshop. And we're going to see here now, it sits down the bottom here, drips and splats. And I can click on one, and it's going to start giving me a look at what it is. Now, one of the things that you will find, I'll just switch to a brush, and I'll grab one of these. And often when you grab them, you'll find that they've got really like large sizes. So, you know, usually it's worth, just for starters, shrinking them down a little bit. That'll be fine. And then I want a new layer. Excuse me. So I'll make a new layer, and you can see now that I'm able to paint around using those drips and splats. I'll just delete that, and I can always use my square brackets to up and down the size of my brushes here. Come down a little bit because they're going to be crazy. And also, it's really worth, if you're not using a stylus for this, a pressure sensitive stylus, it's often worth dialing down the opacity and laying them on just a little bit lighter. Okay, so that's cool. You're going to find that you're going to be able to lay those over the wall, and it's going to work really nicely. So they're a good thing to go with. But let's go back to setting our font. So let's set a font now over on our wall. And let's just add a bit of type. And I'm going to pop it into the middle of my wall here. You can use really, you know, multiple lines, whatever you want. But it's worth when you set this piece of type, thinking about the color palette that you're using, looking at how things are going to you know, sit within your image. So an image like this, you can see it's quite moody. It's got a, you know, some fog there. It's obviously like an early morning or maybe late in the afternoon. It's not really bright lighting, so I wouldn't probably use really bright lights. If you wanted to check that in a little bit more detail, what you can do often, you can go image, adjustments, and we might have a look at the levels. I like looking at the levels. Okay, this is called a histogram. The histogram shows us from black to white. And what we can see here is these white levels, we can see that there's a gap up in the top end here, and that means that this image doesn't have a lot of solid whites. So we're going to try and avoid images or things that have got really solid color intensity. And the same thing down here in the bottom of the histogram. So down here with our really hard blacks, we can see that it doesn't tend to have a lot of information in the histogram. So when we look at these like power poles over here, we can see that actually they're not a hard black, they're kind of like a charcoal grey. So we don't tend to have a lot of pure blacks in this image, not a lot of pure whites, which means that we're going to avoid maybe sort of the extremes of tones. And kind of look at things that are a little bit more mid-range. If you did want to increase the blacks, you can always change these sliders. Often, you know, you might slide them up so the blacks come in a little bit or the whites come in a little bit, but in our case I want to keep it nice and moody, so I'm not going to touch that. Okay, so I've set a piece of type. I've selected kind of like a fairly dull maroon type color for this, and I'm just going to set it on the wall. So here it is up here, so it's a piece of type at the moment. Often I'm kind of lazy with working with Photoshop, and I'll just make 2 layers, and I'll just select both of those layers, and then I'll just go merge layers. and that just kind of turns it from being a type layer that we can edit into being an image. It just squashes the two into a dumb normal layer. It's easy to work with, okay? So I can just place my type where I want it to be, And then this wall's kind of handy because we can see it's got perspective lines in the brickwork running along it. So I'm just going to come along to here, and I am going to just do a little bit of editing this one. So I'm just going to come down, and I'm going to come down to transform, and I'm going to come down to, I like distort. It's pretty basic, but it's all right, especially if you've got these guidelines. So I can just like pull this, so I can see my type is starting to conform to these brick lines running along here. And I might pull this one down this way a bit even, so it kind of works with this one. But you could go either way. Okay, so I can keep my type pretty much like that. I can see actually this vertical here is just a touch off vertical, so I might just tune that so it just looks a little bit better, and that I might just tweak the verticality of that just a bit. Okay, so that's pretty much just like a spherical distortion from the lens that they've used, I think, because we can see that these power poles look pretty well vertical through here. So I would assume that this is from using quite a short lens, and it's just curving around a little bit. Okay, so we're looking pretty good. I'll hit return to make that happen. That's cool. And what then I want to do is come down to my layers palette down here, down to my mix modes, and I can start just moving through these and just starting to see how they look on the wall, and see if I can come up with something that seems to blend with my image nicely. Okay, soft light's working quite well. Guess what? We look at the image, it's actually pretty soft lighting. So often the names will give you a bit of a clue as to how they're going to work, but you never know the way that the colors mix. So I like to, just out of habit, always go through the whole batch of these and just see what's going on. But often you'll find that overlay, soft light, hard light is you're going to have some good kind of often get some good results out of those three. So I'm going to go to soft light. What we can do, if we want to, we can start to change the opacity a little bit. We can look at fading it out a little bit or not. It doesn't really matter. Okay, but I'm going to leave it on fairly pretty much like that. And then I might like to start eroding that text a little bit. So in order to do that, I'm going to come down to my eraser, and let's have a look at some brushes. Doesn't really matter. Even this chunky charcoal's not too bad. I might just up it a little bit, and the opacity of this brush, I might turn it down so it's like about, maybe 15% or something like that. Up a bit in size, and then you can see I can just start kind of just, oops, that is not erasing very well. Let's come back here. Let's just pull my brush size down. Okay. Opacity. Pull it down a little bit further. Okay, and then with this brush, you can see I can just start sort of erasing bits, thinking about where the it might be weathered more. Okay, I've got some sort of random paint splatter here, but it's okay. Okay, I might just sort of rub off the end of these letters a little bit. Okay, so just starting to weather them in so they look like they've been here for a while. So look, that's just up to you how you like it to look, and then you might like to get a little bit more creative, and you might like to move along and grab yourself a brush, and it's back in Photoshop. So I'd set the type, and so the next thing I did was made a new layer here, which is a blank layer. I'm going to stencil on top, and let's make it the skull quite large. I think I've got quite a like a darkish green setup, and I'm just going to click down maybe 3 times, and so it starts to give me that slightly dark, because I had the flow set a little bit low on that. So what I'm going to come down to, I'm going to scroll through these, and probably I'm going to find overlay, soft light, or hard light. I might go overlay. I think that's looking okay, but I might mix down the opacity here a little bit just for starters. That's looking pretty good. Sitting on the wall, But we can see that the skull motif looks like it's looking directly at us at the moment, which we don't want. We want it bedded into the wall. So we're just going to come across to edit, come down to transform, and I'm going to use distort, which is kind of the fairly lazy way of doing this, I think. Let me just check that. Edit, transform, distort. That's better. And I'm just going to start tweaking this a little bit. So I'm going to tweak it that way. Again, I'm looking to line those blue lines up with the grout lines in the wall. That's pretty good. And as you're doing this, you can just sort of tweak it around and just get it visually sort of looking about, you know, how you want it to be. And hit return and you're good. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing and erode this a little bit. So I'm going to grab the eraser tool. I've got lots of brushes here. Special effects, wet media, spray paint one. Okay, and we can see here the size is humongous, so let's pull it down into something a little bit more usable. And the flow here, we'll keep the flow up, but we'll keep the opacity down. Okay, that's good. So use my square brackets here, and then I can just start sort of eroding it where I want to. Okay, maybe it would sort of look like it'd be a bit eroded on the top. It's up to you, however you want to do that. So it works together. And the other thing that I don't mind doing here is coming up to our image adjustments, which is my favorite part of Photoshop, and I'm going to come here into hue saturation, also Command U, and I'm going to bring this up, and this is going to give me the ability to shift the hue of that skull. So it's going to allow me to like fine tune the color a little bit more. I think it's looking a bit better. If I shift it into the blues a little bit, my lightness control just lets me kind of harden it up and just control it a little bit better. So if we push it right down, it goes to black, which actually looks pretty good actually. I'm just going to, but like we talked about before, pure black, there's not a lot of pure black in the image, so let's just make sure that we lighten things up a bit so it fits in with the tonality of the image. Saturation slider in the middle, we can just tweak that a little bit. It's not going to matter too much if we're working with darker, more neutral tones, but if we're working with kind of like tones that have got a bit more color in them, then it's going to push that color up a fair bit. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So let's go okay to that one. And I think for the moment, that's our kind of like simulated graffiti wall done, just so you can get an idea of how it works. Next time, we'll go and have a look at using Illustrator so we can set fonts in a little bit more of an elaborate style using key lines and things. Then we can bring them back into Photoshop and slap them onto some walls, you know, and get some good virtual type graffiti going that way. Okay, so if you keep building this up on the walls, it's going to get more interesting, and little things like bending images around the corner, you know, adding some extra drips below where they might be painted on and things like that. It's all going to help with that kind of like, you know, getting things to look nice and real. And so I might add drips coming off this spout sticking out of the wall there, you know, just kind of getting the surface looking a little bit dirtier as we go along, but you get the idea. So thanks for now, and I'll see you in the next video.